All right. Well, welcome everyone to another compassionate conversation. I am Dawn Fackler, and I'm a grief recovery coach. And I'm just trying to get anything and everything out that we can to help someone through grief, should they need it, or even recognize that they're in grief. Today, I have Holli Kenley with me, and if Holli, you would like to introduce yourself.
Hey, Dawn, I sure will. My name is Holli Kenley, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. And I'm also an author and a speaker and a workshop presenter. And although I speak and write about a lot of different topics, one of the areas that I'm best known for is in the area of betrayal, all kinds of betrayal. So, and I think that's what we're going to be focusing on today.
Yes. Before we jump too far in, if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, and I can kind of incorporate it if we need to, but I will also open it up to a Q&A session more towards after our conversation. So, okay. So Miss Holly, explain to us the differences of grief and betrayal, or the likeness of grief and betrayal.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And before I do that, I think what's really important is the reason I'm going to talk about some of the differences between betrayal and grief is because we have to know what is showing up for us, what's coming up for us, so that if we can identify that, no matter what the issue is, then or someone can help us identify that, then that's going to, delineate what our treatment plan is going to look like, what our recovery plan is going to look like, or help us to reach out for the right resources to help us on our path of healing. So, with that said, I always, as I was sharing with Dawn before, psychology is a soft science. It's not a hard science. So, what I'm saying today is based on my research and on my lived experiences and my education. And so these aren't absolutes, but they are principles and truths that I have found really work in the areas that I work in around betrayal, particularly with crossover with grief. So what I want to do first is point out or just go over the three areas where actually betrayal and grief are quite different. Again, through my eyes and my research and my thinking. So when I'm talking about first, let's kind of look at the definite or the definitions, sort of loose definitions of grief and betrayal. So when I think of grief, I think of it as being the loss of someone or something else. So that certainly would entail the loss of a loved one, but it could also be the loss of a friendship. It could be the loss of a marriage. It could be the loss of a job. It could be the loss of a possession. So I think it's always, an important reminder to say that it could be the loss of someone, but it could be something else as well. Betrayal is the loss of self. Betrayal is the loss of self. Okay, well, what do I mean by that? That sounds a little abstract. Betrayal goes to the core of who we are. And so, for example, it might be the loss of your identity. It might be the loss of your role or your reputation. It could be the loss of your worth. With betrayal, a lot of times we've invested into someone or something that is really important to us. Could be a person or a thing. It could be a partner, could be a job. And when we're betrayed by that person or that thing, we're let go, we're fired, or our partner walks away. that goes to our worth, our sense of value and our sense of worth. So that's what I mean by the loss of self, those interpersonal pieces. There can be a little bit of crossover in that, but that's one of the major things that separate it. The next one goes more to a psychological, the next distinction goes to more of a psychological explanation. Grief is the normal response to a major loss. And I've already delineated, some examples of that. Betrayal is a normal response to the unjust actions or behaviors of another person or persons. Okay. And so in that, let's go back to grief for just a minute. It's the normal response to a major loss. That again speaks to the feelings that come up as a result of that major loss. Betrayal, a normal response to an unjust actions and behaviors of a person or persons, that speaks to the loss of who I am. All right, so with that, that leads us, so just kind of be thinking about that and how, wow, that's different. So the way that we're going to heal from them is going to be distinct. It's going to be different. So I'm just going to mention grief. This is the third distinction. And as I was talking to Dawn before, I work with grief. I treat grief. Grief is not, I'm not an expert in it, like I know at least one of our listeners is today. And I know, Dawn, you are. But I am going to say this, is that we can go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her 5 stages of grief. Most people are somewhat familiar with that. I know the thinking is expanded on that. Some people don't even follow those stages. Some do. Those stages have been expanded. But just to name off the 5: shock, anger, denial, depression, and acceptance. A lot of my colleagues in the marriage and family therapist arena have changed that last stage of acceptance to adjustment. And there's some good thinking around that, some good books on writing on that and such. That's really important to hold those stages in the integrity of which Elizabeth Kubler-Ross intended them. So when I was doing my research on betrayal and what happens when we're betrayed, I didn't want to call them stages. I call them states of being, to really differentiate them, so that when we're betrayed, we go through 3 states of being, because it defines like who we are. The state of confusion, the state of worthlessness, and the state of powerlessness. And much this similarity as with the stages of grief, we know that they're very fluid. We used to think of them as more linear, more rigid. Now we know that we can cycle through them at any point in time. And that is true with betrayal as well. Once the betrayal has hit the first time, because sometimes there's chronic and ongoing betrayal. But those states of being, confusion, worthlessness, and powerlessness, we can cycle through those. So that's a major, major difference, in that, in my opinion, really sets the stage for what the healing is going to look like, depending on what's showing up in the room. One last thing, Dawn, before I pause here and have you jump in here. If there has been a catastrophic or traumatic grief, major loss, or betrayal, we cannot, and we, in my opinion, should not ignore the presence of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's going to come into this, and that's going to play a role and a factor in our healing as well. And I just want to give a brief example. is that a couple months ago here in Southern California, I'm a couple hours from LA, we had these horrific fires. And on the TV, the first thing that I saw that was just so evident was the grief. I mean, it was just jumping out. I mean, you couldn't miss it. But at the same time, because of the catastrophic nature, there was so much trauma involved. And as we've moved forward, and I've been, of course, we get this on the news almost every night, the grief has subsided somewhat. People are still highly traumatized. It's a complex trauma. And now, when I turn on the news at night, what do I hear? I feel so betrayed. Why aren't these people showing up? Where's FEMA? Where's my homeowner's insurance? Where, there now the betrayal is starting to surface. So just kind of interesting, and that one can show up, grief can show up, kind of settle for a bit, and then betrayal might surface, or it can be flipped as well. So anyway, but the piece around trauma, I just want to make sure that was brought in.
And I agree with you and I love how you explain things because I never thought of it that way. The three states of being. Um, but yeah, trauma plays a huge, I mean, you're still going to miss somebody. You're still going to grieve. You're still going to have those betrayals, but with trauma, that throws in a whole new mix. That's more psychological things that you have to work through. And you can have PTSD. I mean, you can get PTSD from the smallest of traumas. Like even I had a car wreck, I got rear-ended. And now if it's somebody comes up close to me, I can feel that. I'm like, ugh. And I start to tense up because I'm like, oh, are they going to stop? Are they going to stop? Because I watched the guy rear-end me and hit me. But I could only imagine what everybody out there is going through with all those fires and like we've talked about before, not just betrayal of where are these people at to help me, it's why did God let this happen? Why do I have to go through this? And that's another side of it that I feel like they definitely coincide with grief and betrayal go together is why. That big question, why? Why do I have to feel this way? Why did this happen?
Um, Dawn, you're in the area of hospice work, correct? Okay, so I wanted to bring that out because when we were talking before, a month or so ago planning, I thought that was such an important piece of your work. Could you speak to that a little bit? Like, I mean, you're not just working with the families, but you're working with the individuals as well.
Definitely. And with hospice, there's a lot of anticipatory grief. Um, and it's a matter of, and it's a lot of why or regrets. What can I do? What could I have done? Um, the families trying to get them on the same page as the patient when the patient a lot of times it's not so much the patient that has problems unless they're younger. I have seen in our younger patients more the grief and betrayal. Actually just last week I had a 31-year-old female with cancer who it was heartbreaking. And my first reaction though was she was in so much pain. So I go first for the physical. Like, we got to get you there. But just her saying, I don't want my kids to see me like this. Or I told them something was wrong, but nobody listened. I, why do I have to go through this? And it was like you said, it's kind of betrayal and grief together because it's like, why are they doing this? But I'm going to grieve what my children are going to lose. I have to grieve that I'm not going to be there to raise them. Whereas usually our older more in the 80s or 90s, they're more at peace. and you don't so much see the betrayal as they have the grief of leaving their loved ones, but they also are the acceptance of this is my temporary home. I'm going somewhere else.
Mhm.
And so it's a real fine line to play depending on the patient and what diagnosis they have and what family dynamics are going on. Um, Hospice is a whole new, it's definitely a whole new beast. Without just being a nurse, you deal with a lot of stuff delivering news, but hospice, you know the end. We already know what's going to happen. So it's trying to help them accept the situation and accept what's going on. And like I said, there's a lot of grief and definitely betrayal in that. Definitely was last week with the patient I helped take care of.
And thank you, Dawn, for sharing that example. And just a few minutes ago, I referenced like around the fires that the grief was there first, and then along with the trauma, and then the betrayal started to, surface. It can be what I see most times when a client comes into my office is I see the betrayal first, and they're coming in and asking why. They're in that state of confusion. Why did this happen? Why did they how do I make sense of this? I can't, so that I'm just pointing that out, that just then I know where we are and where I need to go. And then there's shortly thereafter into that state of worthlessness and then in the powerlessness. However, as you pointed out, the third pattern would be is that they're both presenting simultaneously. And that's very tricky and that's very hard. And what I look at when I'm seeing both presenting, and this again, this is just sort of a generality, is that grief pulls us inward. It's typically we're more depressed, we're sad, we're hopeless, we're helpless, and we're just kind of we might be isolating and just turning away and shutting people out and that kind of thing. So I'm listening for that and I'm watching for that. I'm asking questions around that. Whereas betrayal pulls you out. You're trying to go resecure your truths. You're trying to go get back what you lost. You're, again, in that state of worthlessness and powerlessness. You can be kind of spinning as you're trying to resurrect the life you once had. And so again, that informs me about what tools and strategies I can use to kind of get the client to settle back in. And we say with depression, we want to get them to turn outward, and with betrayal, I want to get them to turn inward and sort of settle down. But it is tricky. And I know I had a young client a year or so ago in her 30s too, Dawn, who stage 4 cancer. And I don't want to give too many details around that, except to say one week she would come in and it was more around the betrayal piece. And the next week she would come in and it was more around the grief piece. So we're just honoring both of those, hearing them, listening to them, and then tailoring what we want to do in helping to move them forward, which one big piece is listening and letting them know we hear them and validating those feelings. Um, yeah, it's hard. It's very hard.
I know another emotion that I see fall into those two is guilt
Mm,
because they feel guilty for feeling relieved or they feel guilty for feeling betrayed or they feel guilty because they didn't speak their truth. They didn't talk more. They didn't fight more. Um, and it's just weird how they can all go together.
Can you, without divulging any confidentiality, could you maybe give an example of that?
Um, well, like the patient, the 30-year-old with cancer, she's like, I told them something was wrong, but they didn't listen. So she almost felt guilty for not saying more and fighting for what she felt was wrong.
Hmm.
Or even families, they feel guilty because did we do everything we could have done? Even if it was against the patient wishes. Like the patient will say, I'm on a DNR. I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to live like that. But families just, they have that guilt of they feel like they gave up if they don't continue to look for aggressive treatment. They feel the guilt of, did I give up on them? And then it's almost like it's not that they were betrayed, but they feel guilty because they may have betrayed the patient for not pushing harder.
Dawn, do you, in your work, do you then deal with that, or I mean, help them process that, or are they also in therapy or in some type of counseling? How do you work with that?
A lot of times they're not. I definitely suggest it and I tell them, and then since my last talk, actually, I've gotten this, let's turn guilt into grace because you need to give yourself grace. You could only do what you could do with what you knew.
Mhm.
And so it's just, I try to more focus on the let's turn guilt into grace.
Oh, I like that.
And and then my last one, she said, it's a pivot point. It's not an ending, it's just a pivot. So, you've learned new, let's pivot, give ourselves grace. And if it comes up again, you'll have a different way of approaching.
Mhm. Yes, I really like that. That's good. That's good.
But I don't have the training you do. Mine's just kind of fallen. It's like you said, I go more on what I've dealt with. Because with nursing, we don't go as far into the psychology. Obviously, we hit it because we deal with a lot of different things, but mine is okay, what worked in this particular similar situation because they're never the same. And a lot of times I just kind of feel, okay, which way should I go with this? You just read the room. Me and a friend laughed. I said, I think I learned everything I needed to know about nursing when I was bartending because you get that feel for the room and you feel the energy and you feel what's going on. And depending on what you believe in, God, spirit, it helps guide me which way I need to go to comfort these people. I hope that what I say comforts them. And it's like it says, they may never remember my name, but they'll remember how I made them feel.
Oh, Dawn, that's beautiful. Absolutely. Yes.
And so that's why I sit and think I try to remember if I was in their situation because I have been. I've had grandparents on hospice. I've had a grandparent who died of cancer. My dad died suddenly. My grandma, we thought it was dementia, but I really now now that I think it back, I think it was more stroke related. But you just everything's so different. You have to learn how you feel. And even if they haven't died, but if they've had a traumatic injury. One of my previous speakers, Lisa Boone, she has a book out, Severed Sacredness. And it's about her daughter's journey from a traumatic brain injury from a ski accident. And her being a nurse herself, going through the whole medical side of things and everything going on and being the mom. And I love how she says she's made grief her friend. She's befriended grief. Hey, you're there. I see you. The betrayal. Hey, I see you. But I don't have to hang out with you.
Mm.
And so even that, sometimes she grieves and feels betrayal of, why did my daughter have to go through this? Why is her life so much different than what we had anticipated it to be? Now Jessie is great and she's alive, and it's been 15, 16 years now, and she is thriving, but she's still not the same person she was before the accident. And I learned something new from everybody that I talk with. And that's why I was like, I was writing notes to help me process, so I can better process what my families are feeling. So yeah, I throw a lot of it on my faith and reassurance that hopefully I make them feel better and not worse. But then there's times that you have to be really honest, and for lack of better words, sometimes I feel like the asshole when I have to be blunt. Be like, look, I don't want to squash hope. I don't want to squash that light you have, but we're in this situation and it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And then not only do I basically throw grief in their face, then I need to try and help them navigate it after I've said, here it is.
Wow, that is such heavy and hard work, Dawn. I just really admire and respect the work that you're doing. And as you were talking, and I'm just sort of watching our time here a little bit, but something that just really resonated with me is that with both grief and betrayal, and this is true of so many other issues as well, is that, and I say this not that it's a hopeless situation. I don't mean it when I say this, but I think it kind of goes to that acceptance and adjustment that we can experience healing, we can experiencing those shifts taking place in us and get to a certain place, and we're kind of motoring along, and then something happens or something comes up, and we go and we revisit that grief, or we revisit that betrayal, the confusion or the worthlessness, whatever it is. And now we have the tools at our disposal to implement and to move forward. And so it doesn't lessen our pain necessarily, or the possibility that that pain is going to come up, but we're more um, able to adapt and adjust and move forward with with more confidence, with more healing, with more recovery under our belt. And I just wanted to comment on this piece personally. I had mentioned, I think, this to you, Dawn, and is that our family lost our son-in-law. Will be 2 years in May, and and it. I work in the area of betrayal so much that then having this catastrophic and traumatic death in our family, of course, I met grief, right face to face with it. And I want to mention one other thing that I say at the end of my TED talk is that, you know, betrayal is not going to, time doesn't heal. It's what we do with our time that makes healing possible. And I really believe that about grief as well, because I just dove in head first into allowing that process to unfold with me, and really was mindful of the not keeping time around it, but just keeping a pulse on myself and what was happening as I was moving through the different stages or feelings and all of that around our loss of David. And it was just a good reminder that we can get through it. We will get through it. And it's important that we do the work as we are moving through it.
Life is all about growth.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm not sure how you put it, but then I sit and think all these tools help prepare you for the pivot.
Yes.
Because that's all life is a whole lot of pivoting. Nothing works out as planned.
Maybe just before I could speak to just as far as betrayal a little bit, because there's a little bit of difference and I believe in how we're going to tackle betrayal. Just a few thoughts around that. Usually, when someone has come in from a betrayal, whatever it might be, they're in that state of confusion and then worthlessness and powerlessness. But and and they fall into a few really common traps. And it's completely normal. But I want to just name a few because this is what keeps people stuck in betrayal. It keeps them from taking that first step at what they need to do. But I have to just like be there with them. And then there'll come a point in time like you will, Don, where I'll say, Kate, we've been here for a while. How's it serving you? One of those traps is they wait for the betrayer in particular to make it right. And this is a lot of times when it's around a relational betrayal. Okay, so one, they're waiting for the betrayer to make it right. Number two, they're waiting for someone, it might be someone or something else, to come along and make it better, fix it, make it right. Because after all this was done to me, so someone else should have to fix it. Number three, and this is I see so often, is that clients or individuals tether their healing to what the betrayer is doing or not doing. Many times I'll have parents who have their adult children or their teen children or whatever age are involved in addiction or self-harming behaviors or whatever. Well, the child will start to do better. So then the parent feels that they're doing better. Or there might be, they're in recovery. And so and these parents feel betrayed because they've invested into their kids and their kids are not showing up in the ways that they feel. But anyway, I also see this with partners and friendships. So that sort of that codependent piece where you think, okay, things are better because they're doing better. So that really keeps you hooked in. And the other piece that keeps us stuck is this sort of what we call fanciful thinking that we're it might sound kind of harsh or cruel that we're more important than we really realize we are, because betrayal is about some other person, place, thing, opportunity, need, or desire being more important than us. I mean, cut to the chase, that's what it's about. So we want to believe, and this is so painful, but it's like that we're more important to the betrayer than we are. So those can kind of keep us stuck because, and then I'll just finish up with this, Dawn, is that as I say to my clients when they're ready, is betrayal is your work. It has nothing to do with anybody else. This is your work. Well, what do you mean, Holly? I say, you have to write yourself. Well, no, but nope, you have to write yourself. This is what the work entails. So all the other is until we can kind of get to there, and sometimes it takes going through those three states of being before we get to that place. And in fact, it does take that before we can get to that piece where, okay, I'm ready, I'm turning inward, I'm tethering myself to my foundations, and I'm ready to move forward.
Yes, very, very true. I will ask, do we have any questions or comments that anyone would like to make? Go ahead. bring yourself up. Oh, let me unmute you.
I just want to say I only got invited yesterday by Holly, and I'm so moved by this conversation between the two of you guys. I was feeling tears coming down my eyes from the beginning. This is like listening to both of you was exactly what I needed, like right now. This is so powerful. So thank you, Holly, for inviting me, and it's wonderful that I had the opportunity and the time today to jump on here. This is a really powerful conversation. So thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Well, Charlotte, thank you for, I know you're busy. And I mean, I know that very well. So thank you for coming on. And I appreciate what you've said. And do you have a copy of Breaking Through Betrayal? Because we had told people if they show up today that we were going to give.
I
I think
I believe I do. Yes. Didn't I? Yeah, I do have. I'm looking over at the books I have of yours. I've got Shifting Bravely, and I'm pretty sure I have that as well. I don't know if I do actually.
Okay, well, I'll check in with you because we did, I put that out there on when in my advertisement. So if not,
Oh,
we touch base several times a week. So I'll after today you check in, and then if you don't, I'll get you that copy, or if you want any of my other
well,
books, I'll give you one.
I could see if it's at the library too, because it's
Oh,
probably worth reading for me. I've never really thought of, but like I've listened to your TED Talks, and of course, I'm very familiar with all of your writing and all that through our collaborative work. But, I think I'd said this to you before, like, uh, I think myself, like most sort of average normal people who aren't in psychology and all that, so the language is different. Like the way that you're like sort of describing betrayal, in terms of not just one-on-one betrayal, but like larger sort of global social betrayals, like really, like I think it's something that a lot of us don't really identify with in that way. And also the when you were describing the PTSD that comes in relationship to that, like I can really identify with that for some of the things that I've shared with you that I've sort of experienced. So it's a topic that isn't really discussed that much. And it's a real aha, to use Oprah's term, aha moment for me to hear it described in that way, because it sort of starts to unpack and make sense. A sort of a space of feeling that a lot of us get confused around. Yeah, yeah, it's really good.
thank you, Charlotte. And the last edition of Breaking Through Betrayal came out in 2016, the second, well, not second, but not the last, but the second. And I mean, so much of our thinking has grown and changed in the last 10 years. If I were to write a third edition, which I'm probably going to just go do my classes, but the point being is that in the first and second edition, I talk about chronic or ongoing betrayal, or even episodic betrayal. Like if you live in your betrayal environment, or
Yes.
you're in constant association
Yeah.
with your betrayal environment, like the people in LA driving by their homes and just seeing the
Yeah.
mess, or it could be a work environment that you're
Yeah.
driving by. But now we know that that is complex. Well, it can lead to complex PTSD.
Yeah.
So that is just so important. You can start having nightmares. You can,
Mhm.
flashbacks. You can be anxious. You can get dysregulated. Your nervous system gets all
Yes.
messed up. And so, yeah, it's really important to bring that into the conversation if it's ongoing, chronic, or you're in, like I said, the betrayal environment.
Yeah, and I think that I won't talk more because I could just keep talking. I know I'm not supposed to be in here this much, but
It's
um,
fine.
like for me, and I think, most of the other people that I'm friends with and what have you, when, we're discussing various things like this, like I've never heard someone frame betrayal like in terms of job loss, or say a business loss of a business, or like the fires and then the consequences of betrayal around that. So I think it's a really interesting conversation that would could be very helpful to a lot of people, learning how, because I think I've mentioned this to you before. When I started learning about I heard somebody use the word gaslighting a few years ago, and I was like, what is gaslighting? And like just knowing the language and the concepts behind it really helps people so much unpack and cope with and deal with some of the stuff that otherwise it just sort of lives in you, right? And you don't really process it. So yeah, it's interesting to think of it in that way. So yeah.
Good.
Actually, Charlotte, I want to say thank you for talking, because I always wonder, okay, is this helping anyone? Is this going anywhere? Is, you know, the subject too far out? And when you say we break it down, that really helps too, because I think sometimes those of us in a professional field, we take for granted our intelligence and what we have learned. We think
Yeah.
it's just common sense or it's common knowledge. And we take that for granted and forget, no, this isn't something everybody just knows.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you.
and just to add one more thing, like, because I listen to a lot of the wellness podcasts, the popular influencers and stuff, but they're like putting it in a way that's understandable, like that also has kind of almost the bullet points that accompany it, is so much more helpful. Because I think listening to a lot of there's so much information out there, but it's not really specific in the way that it was framed, the way you guys were speaking about it today. So I think that's why people are sort of grasping, trying to learn new skills, but they're not sure how to identify what the people that, say the Mel Robbins and all these guys who are pretty cool, right, to listen to. But a lot of times there aren't really how to kind of parts to it, which people are looking for. Like, that they can associate, like if somebody's in a lot of grief over the fires, they wouldn't even know how do I, like, how do we identify with that as betrayal and grief? You know what I mean? So um, I think that's, yeah, really interesting.
Good. Good.
See, Paloma, you came off, you turned your mic on.
Yep, I'm back. Hi, Paloma here. John, thank you for this forum. Thank you for doing this, and I hope you'll do it again. I'm very familiar with Holli's work and her wisdom, and I'm so glad that you are having a conversation around grief and betrayal. They're close cousins, both having to deal with change. And I love Holly's distinction around inward versus outward, where we need to go. And I always take something away when I'm listening to um, the way that she's able to break that down for us and make that distinction. But pulling on the thread around really the word that comes to me is, it sounds like a big word, but around responsibility for yourself, when you're really saying, yes, it's not out there where my healing is, it's really within me. And that's such a beautiful, once that realization comes, there's a lot of power that comes with that, or a lot of you're reclaiming yourself, truly.
Yes.
And so thank you for this. And I'm sorry I'm on my phone and I'm not as familiar with Zoom's functionality on phone. So appreciate the conversation, and I'm looking forward to the recording again. I like to pick up and listen again for those nuances. So thank you again.
Thank you, Paloma. Appreciate you being here.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you all being here as well. And Paloma, when you said responsibility, it made me think of accountability.
Mhm.
We need to, that's a lot of betrayal. You need to be accountable for how you feel.
Accountable to yourself. Yes, indeed. Right. And when you've lost yourself, it's hard to trust yourself to have that accountability. So that's built over time. But once that realization comes, it's pretty powerful, or it can be. That also builds on itself, finding yourself again.
Mm. And on that note of hope, which I love, is that reclaiming those. So when I think of the loss of self, I think of just sort of like a puzzle where all the pieces have just, we've been betrayed, and all these pieces are just kind of like a big jigsaw puzzle been scattered about. And whenever, I mean, especially if we have trauma from our childhoods and whatever, but the beauty in recovering from betrayal is that we have that opportunity to recover those pieces and to reclaim those pieces and give those. That is our work, to give it back to ourselves, to give it back to, in psychology, we say the inner child, but to put all those pieces back. And both Charlotte, I'm going to just give one little example that just speaks to this. Know that Dawn, a couple months ago, well, little not February 15th, I was crowned Miss Senior California.
Oh,
And,
Yay.
and I did it for a lot of reasons. And I think I've shared with both of them, but I'll just say out loud that one of the pieces that was to give back to little Holly, because she was never seen or validated physically or in a lot of other ways growing up. And even though the pageant is more about, it's about just who you are as a person and how you show up as a senior, but I've never had a crown put on my head. And when that crown was placed on my head, that little girl inside of me was beaming. And so at 73 years old, we can still reclaim those pieces, recover them and reclaim them.
when you say that, I
Mm.
think of like the memes and stuff. Put that crown on your head and remember the queen that you are.
I love that. And what just came alive in me is reclaiming those pieces. It's exciting too to know that once you have those pieces back, you can put them back together how you want to put them back together. That's the other, and that can look very differently and exciting and joyful.
Oh, yes. Exactly. It's on your terms, it's in your time,
Mm.
and you get to define that, what it means to you. Yeah.
On that note, I will say if anyone ever wants to reach me or find me, overabundanceoflight.com is my website. And all my info is there. Holly, how could anyone get a hold of you?
Well, both Paloma and Charlotte.
I think they already know how.
Yes, the best way to get hold of me is through my website. It's hollikenley.com, Holly with an I, and there's a contact page, and that's the best way. Yeah.
We'll just say this conversation is complete, I feel like. So I will stop the recording if I remember how.
Well, I want us to say thank you, Dawn, for having me. Thank you so much.